Well, hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Your Manchester.
Yes, with me, Mark Llewellyn.
And me, Miss Belinda Scandal. What we're about to show you is a series of wonderful interviews with some really very inspiring people.
Yes, so this is the first of two very special editions of Your Manchester that we've produced in association with Manchester Pride and with the assistance of the George House Trust. Some of the stories are going to be difficult to listen to, but they're well worth listening to. In fact, they're extraordinary stories.
I grew up in homeless hostels, living through very difficult times. I experienced a lot of domestic violence growing up, so as a result I ended up living in those hostels, and I was struggling with my sexuality and figuring out who I was.
I met a guy from New Zealand. He'd been backpacking round. We got together and we stuck. We barely had a night apart. I decided that, or we decided, after he'd proposed, that we were going to move to New Zealand. So all the plans were in place. We'd seen the place we were going to buy. We had, we knew we were going to buy a farm.
I remember meeting some guys online. I was 15 at the time, and they would take advantage of the fact that I lived on my own. And a lot of domestic violence happened, a lot of rape and things like that. And I grew up in my 20s with that mindset that that's what love was and that's all that I was worth.
Phone's on the side. I hate phones to this day, but the phone went. I thought, should I answer it? I went, yeah, answered it. He says, oh, it's a doctor from the clinic. I know you were bothered about your chest x-ray. It was fine, but I need to tell you you're HIV positive. I'm like, what? I didn't have a clue. I didn't even know they'd done the test. I'm home alone, really wasn't thinking. And what happened was that I was doing work. I ran a busy retail outlet in Manchester. I was the manager there. And I couldn't ring up any of my supervisors and say, listen, because I wasn't thinking right. I've just been told I'm HIV positive. So it's like, I don't know what to do, I'm really scared. He said, well, take a week off work, which I thought was generous at the time. Take a week off work, don't tell anyone, especially when you come back to work, don't tell anyone there either.
And I became extremely unwell. And it was during the time of COVID in 2021, and I was hospitalised and I was undergoing a lot of tests, and I was on a drip. I'd lost a lot of weight, I wasn't eating properly, and one of the last tests to come back were the HIV test.
Mum, I don't know what to do. I'm so ill, I don't really know what to do with myself. My mum said, come home and we'll sort you out. So I flew back to England, and yeah, my mum was brilliant. She kind of got me into hospital really quickly, and I was pumped full of fluids, and I was the diagnosis at the time was just severe dehydration. They didn't really know what was wrong with me. And yeah, they did a few tests over a few days. I was just losing weight constantly. I was just nothing was staying inside me at all. And I was just getting weaker and weaker by the second. And a doctor came over to me, which I realise now is a bit strange, that they asked me whilst I was around my family at the time, and the doctor came over and said, is there a chance that you could be HIV positive? And I said, no, not at all. No, there's no chance, not at all.
And I had another partner for the past 6 years. So I'm thinking, where the hell has it come from? Has he given it to me? Thinking you get HIV and within a month. So I thought, well, I just don't understand it at all. We went and got tested again the following day, It used to take 5 days to get the results back then. Mine came back, yes, I was positive, showing high levels of viral load, the amount of virus that's in the blood, and it's highly likely that I could have had it for years. When they told me it was 10, 15, 20 years that you can carry this virus without showing any signs whatsoever.
And at the time, a HIV test back in sort of 2008 was a rapid test was 24 hours. So they did a rapid test, and then the next morning they put me into a wheelchair and wheeled me to a doctor's office. And they just said to me, like, I'm really sorry to tell you you're HIV positive, and we think that's what's causing this illness. And you know, I was 22-year-old, kind of emaciated in this wheelchair that, you know, I could basically lay down in. I was that tiny, and I just like broke down, and all I'd ever known was HIV was kind of, it leads to AIDS, and AIDS will kill you, and that's kind of all I knew.
This test came back negative. I don't know how, I don't know, I'm not a religious person, but I just couldn't believe it. It was the one piece of good news. The other bit was that the New Zealand embassy said, no, you're not allowed in at all.
So straight the first question I asked was like, how long have I got left to live?
And it was Christmas Day when I got a phone call, and it was the hospital, and they asked me to come into the hospital and that it was urgent. And I remember looking at my dad, and we were about to have Christmas dinner, so it was probably the most inconvenient time. And I asked my dad if he'd take me to the hospital, which he did, but I asked him to wait in the car because I felt like I knew what they were going to tell me. And when I walked into the hospital, he sat me down, and he had a very stern look on his face. And he said to me, I'm really sorry to tell you, Andrew, but you've got HIV.
The advice at the time in 2008 was, you know, we're not going to put you on medication at the moment. We'll see how you go, and we'll keep monitoring you, you know, regularly. And when I first got diagnosed, I just had nobody to talk to. I didn't know anybody that was HIV positive. I didn't know, you know, who I could speak to outside of kind of doctors, and you know, I wasn't kind of fortunate enough to live sort of around Manchester at the time. So, you know, my options kind of were really limited. I'd gone online and looked at research and things, and tried to really understand like what HIV was. I think kind of everyone does that when they go through their initial kind of phase of trying to understand their diagnosis. They try and find out, you know, a lot about what's happening in your body.
I thought he was going to put a strain on everything, but he was amazing. He said, no, even though I want to go back, I'll build a life here with you here. The minute I found out I had HIV, it started twisting my head. When I went on the first lot of medications, it affected me even more, because back then you didn't have to start the medication straight away. So I had a whole year where we didn't tell anyone. There was no outward signs, and he was such a nice person that I couldn't stand the thought of him having to, I thought, live while, give it 5 or 10 years, let's sit by my bedside as I'm melted away. So I ended up turning into a real bastard to try and force him away.
And I felt like a disgrace. I felt like I deserved this, that I'd done this to myself. And I walked out of the hospital to my dad, and he was like, so what have they said? I'm sure everything was fine. And I said, well, actually it's not. I said, unfortunately, they've said I do have HIV. And my dad was my best friend at the time, and we were very close, and I could share everything with him. And I didn't get the reaction from him that I'd hoped. And he actually told me that I was a disgrace, that I'd ruined my life, and that what was I playing at, basically, and that I should be ashamed.
You know, it took 2 years. He left. I've never heard from him since. And there's never been anybody else since either. So
I ended up leaving my dad's, and our relationship completely deteriorated, and I felt like I'd lost my support system. And in the first 2 years of being diagnosed with HIV, I spiralled, and I drank more, I did a lot of drugs, I allowed more men to abuse me. And when it came to my 30th birthday, the night of my 30th, I'd had a lot to drink and I planned to take my own life that night. And the main reason I didn't is because I was due to see my best friend the next day, who happened to contact me that night and remind me that we were due to meet up. And when I met him the next day, he saw how broken I was and he encouraged me to get sober.
For a long time, I'm talking maybe 10, 15 years, I didn't tell anybody outside of my immediate friends and family. You know, I was very kind of cautious about who I told. I felt like it was this big secret that I couldn't explain to anybody.
I didn't think I would be here still.
Got a letter to say I had to go to Lancaster Hospital to speak to them. They'd found something discrepancy in my blood. So I rang them, went to see them there and then that Friday morning. And when I got there, the poor gentleman who'd been chosen to tell me the news wanted another blood sample. I wasn't prepared to give it until he told me exactly what he was looking for. And that day they told me that I was living with HIV.
After being diagnosed in 2006, I just thought, well, this is my time to go.
I knew that day that there was something else we had to do, and that was to test my child, who was 5.5 years old at the time. To do same-day testing in '95 wasn't something we did a lot of, and it was mainly done in emergencies or if there was a problem with someone in hospital. So I collected my son from school. I called Alan Lyons, who was the social worker for HIV at the time. I was working with him on a project and knew him. I worked with people living with HIV at home. And it was a hard day.
It came as a shock, but it didn't, because just the word and just the diagnosis made me feel like there's no cure, there's nothing that's going to be done. And I'm just going to die.
And so when I was on these forums, you know, I would see these posts and I would see people saying that if you contracted HIV, you would get AIDS and die. That was the message that I kind of knew. And so compounding that with the things like the tombstone ads and the lack of education, it was terrifying.
And I knew then that every choice I'd ever made in life had now affected one of the most amazing people in my world. And that was my child, because he too now was living with HIV.
As soon as the doctor said to me, you know, you're HIV positive, I just said, okay, so how long have I got left to live? That was the first question that came out of my mouth, because that's all I knew.
Once it kind of went around, oh my gosh, you know, this woman's just tested positive and she's in our community. I then, unlike most people in 1995, was surrounded by love and care. And it's the difference that most people don't realise. Anyone can take medication, and anyone out there who was taking medication back in 95, it was DDI, it was AZT, it was toxic. It took over your life. But the other thing was, I got love and hugs. My son all of a sudden had uncles who did so many amazing things with him.
I remember the doctors told me before I was on medication that if you get a cold, it's like getting the flu. If you get a flu, it's like getting pneumonia. If you get pneumonia, well, you've probably had it.
At the time, we only used to do the T4 count, and my son's was 0, mine was 3. A normal person would have been between 700 and 900, and we were given a year to 18 months to live.
So I tootled off to a little private clinic and paid 500 quid in the centre of Manchester, and I got this little test, and the nurse did the test, and she sat down with me and she started to cry. She burst out crying. I'm really sorry, you have HIV, you're going to die.
I knew how we were going to end up dying because that's what I did. I looked after people at home who were dying of AIDS, because in hospitals, in doctors' surgeries, in dentists, we were rejected.
And I took her hand and I sat for 45 minutes explaining to this qualified clinical professional that actually undetectable means untransmittable, and actually with effective medication I'd be okay in a short space of time. As a result of that, I came out of the clinic somewhere on King Street, I won't name them, but you can guess, and thought, shite, what am I going to do?
I was just new. I had just come from my country, Malawi. I came to act during the Edinburgh festivals, and I was so unwell right from back home, but I needed to be here. I wanted a new life, and when I found an opportunity to come and act, I came. So after the acting, I went to live with a friend in Bradford, and I was so unwell, and my friend took me to the GP. And they did the normal testing, the routines for new people who are just coming to this country, and that's when they found out I was HIV positive.
I had all kind of stupid thoughts going through my head, and Lauren arranged an appointment straight away for me at the LGBT Foundation. And I would say that she was instrumental in my journey to self-belief and confidence. Had a long conversation, arranged an appointment at the Hathersage. The Hathersage were great. They referred me to George House Trust, and therein started my journey with George House Trust and advocacy around HIV. I was undetectable within 3 months or so, and of course started to think about, actually, HIV doesn't define who I am. In fact, I live in spite of it.
Luckily for me, I had some very good information I was given.
I was happy because I had known I could be HIV positive, but I didn't want to find out when I was in my country because I knew stigma is really 100%, and I thought I could end it all. So when they found out here, I was like, okay, I'm going to get helped.
I now had to face my family. My family did not openly want to tell me they've accepted my diagnosis and how they were going to help me. However, single-handedly, I've just moved on. I decided to get on my antiretrovirals to make sure that, yes, I was going to have a better life and I could still carry on living if I continued taking them. However, the starting point was difficult. I did not want to even start them. And I kept prolonging it, but by prolonging it, it was not doing me any good. I was still on my way down until I was told that I was being pressured. And I think pressured is not the right word, but it was like saying, let's get down, let's do it, it's for your own good. And I then commenced my antiretrovirals, and I've carried on. It hasn't been an easy journey. In the 19 years that I've been diagnosed, only in the last year, so as long as that many years, I have never been undetectable.
Maybe I'll be dead by now. Yeah, that comes on a lot in my mind. I think I could have been dead, because I don't think I could have been brave to go and get tested. But even if they could have tested me, I think maybe it could have been stigma or discrimination that could have pushed me to that level.
What they didn't see was I'm a human being. HIV doesn't care what country you're from, what language you speak, what sexuality you are, and what you were born. It's a human virus.
It was a lot. I suffered a lot of discrimination at the home I was living in, because they found out about my HIV treatment. They had to chase me out of the house. And I went on Facebook to look for people I can live with, because obviously I was new in a country. I didn't know much people. A couple found me, a single mom found me, because I think when she saw my post, she was like, oh, she's going to help me with the kids. And she took me in to live with her, and she got told, oh, the woman you've just taken in, she's a woman living with HIV. And she was scared, and she chased me from the house again. So in short, I've been everywhere, really. I've been to London, I've been to Portsmouth. I have gone everywhere where people like my personality, they enjoy being around me, because I'm a banter, I'm a fun person to live with. So they love my personality, but as soon as they find out I'm taking medication, that's it.
I knew that there was this illness that was making my friends thin, that was making my friends disappear. All of a sudden it was, oh, have you seen Mark? We don't talk about Mark anymore. But what I didn't know was that this illness affected heterosexuals.
It just got too much. One Sunday afternoon, you know, everything was just, it was just a big mismatch of, right, okay. And I just sat down and I told my husband. Natural reaction was, oh shit, what do I do? But he is actually a doctor, and he was like, oh, this is fine. This is fine. Like, had it been 10 years ago, we'd be having a different discussion.
I just said, yes, I'm taking medication and there's nothing I can do. And it was the reaction of, okay, I'm giving you time to find somewhere else to live, but meanwhile, don't come out of the room.
People are genuinely afraid. I can still tell people now, because I'm quite open about it, they'll take a step back. You know, they'll go into themselves. You can see it in the faces. You can see it in their eyes. I've become very good at reading people's eyes. And you can see there's a genuine fear.
So I used to be quite protective of a lot of my queer friends, thinking, oh my God, you must be careful of this, when really it was me that should have been careful. It was me that should have been taking more precautions. When me and my husband had our child, he was the most wanted, beautiful child ever. When I walked into that hospital with a sick child, they didn't see a human.
But there was a family that followed me to a party. I was living with them. They found out about my medication when I was at a party. It was a weekend, and she came with my medication in a plastic bag. She stopped the DJ, the music, and she stood on a table. I still have flashes of images. And she was like, look, she's HIV positive, putting the medication, like dropping them on the floor. And I was there just numb, like, wow. And it was the anger, the frustration that she was taking out. And meanwhile, I was asking myself, so what do people want me to do? This is me now. If
someone says to you, you've got HIV, the first thing, if they're close enough, just give them a hug straight away. If not, hold out your hand. First thing it does, it takes you away from the face, but it shows that you're not scared. And this group of people have been particularly quiet. One guy sat in the corner, not said a thing all the way, so they're all going out, and then he comes up to me and he says, can I shake your hand? It gets me every time. A little thing like that. But we need to tackle the fear.
Some fantastic words and some fantastic stories there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, really inspiring people. In fact, when we recorded those interviews, we were quite humbled, weren't we?
Very humbled, yeah.
And so in next week's episode, we're going to revisit all our participants, but we're going to now find out what they did with their lives. And I can assure you that there are some even more amazing stories to come.
Only on
Your Manchester.